Okay, he's telling us that.
A newborn king to see, come, 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 come. Our finest gifts we bring, come, 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 to lay before a king, come, 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 come. So to honor him, come, come, come.
Good morning. Good morning. Welcome to Unity of Charlotte. It's a pleasure to welcome you here on this day before Christmas. And so delighted to be together in spiritual community where we remember the truth of who we are. And we come together as we do every week to recognize and know that there's a divine intelligence, an infinite wisdom, a presence, and a power, some would call it God, that is working through us, revealing itself as us. And so we come together not so much to teach you who you are, but help you remember who you are. So I'm delighted you're here during this special time. We believe that spiritual community helps enhance our experience of life, and so we're grateful to be together on this journey. I want to let you know that we have a ministry of prayer that is available to you if you're experiencing challenges and would like spiritual support around that. You can do a version of that located in the lobby, or you can also go online and submit those way. That way, and our ministry of prayer will work on those. Today is also our Healing and Wholeness group meets in the Unity Room today, and so they're available for energetic spirit, mind, body work with you if that is of interest. It's a lovely service that group provides, and we're blessed to have them here. So I have a couple of things that are coming up that I want you to make you aware of. Today is, we have our normal service. Tomorrow night we will have our Christmas Eve candle lighting service, which is really probably my favorite service of the entire year. And so we invite you to join us. It's open to anyone that would like to be here at 7 o'clock. We'll do some traditional songs. We've got some special arrangements made, and then we'll do the candle lighting ceremony, and it'll be lovely. Then next week we'll have our normal Sunday morning service, and then on New Year's Eve we will have our releasing the end of the year ceremony, our burning bowl ceremony. This year I've cajoled Susan and Jerry to bring their crystal chakra aligned bowls, and we'll do a sound bath prior to that, and then we'll have a releasing ceremony and then a creation ceremony going into the new year. So it's always a wonderful way to bring to closure this year and start the new year. Also want to make you aware we're in a time of renewing our membership. Our bylaws require everyone to renew their membership or that all membership needs to be renewed every 3 years is the way to say it. It's not you personally based on your start date. So we've got some forms that you'll see where the name tags are that look like that. So if you'll take a moment and complete those before the 15th of January, that would be absolutely lovely. Let's see, what else? I think that's it for the moment. So let's begin the inward journey. And today we have a special featured prayer. His name's Reverend Marty. Thank you. So I invite you just to turn inward as we recognize and know this divine intelligence and this infinite wisdom. As we come together in this season of light in the remembrance of the truth that even in the darkest days, there is a light emerging. And so we open our hearts and our minds to be present and available for this divine light. We open our minds to that infinite wisdom to lead and guide and direct us. We open our hearts to experience the compassion of the season, the joy of being. And we open ourselves to remember the truth that as we celebrate this Christmas story, it is in truth the story for each of us and for each and every one. As we recognize divinity being born into the world, we sense and feel the eternal story being born in us. So how grateful I am to be together today. How grateful I am for the many hands and hearts that come together each Sunday to provide this service. I know that we are truly blessed, that life is good, all is well. For all of this and so much more, I simply give thanks, allowing it to be so. As together we say, and so it is. Amen. proclamation. With me, my soul awakens to the light within. I am made whole as I awaken to this inner presence. My awareness of the divine expands and grows. I know the truth, and I am set free. My soul awakens to the light within. Thank you. Our prayer today is that our computers move into the Christmas season along with us. The Grinch is having his way with our systems, but it's all good. We're here in love. So I'd like to read for you today, or today's selection comes from a beautiful poem by John Shelby Spong. Now, if you're not familiar with John Shelby Spong, then you need to be. If you're interested in the Bible at all, one of the instrumental teachers for me in understanding how the Bible came together, how it evolved, and understanding. So his message, my favorite book of his is Rescuing the Bible from Fundamentalism. And it's not in any way a dish. He's just a brilliant scholar, because what he says is when we look in a literal sense at something that was written in a metaphorical way, it creates confusion. And so he helps us to understand it. Long introduction to this poem, which is rather long. I've kind of cut it down, and it's still long. So I invite you just to sit back, to relax, and to take a deep breath as we move through it. It's called Christ Power. Far back, beyond the beginning, stretching out into the unknowable, incomprehensible, unfathomable depths, dark and void of infinite eternity behind all history, the Christ power was alive. Here all things that we know began their journey into being. Here light separated from darkness. Here Christ power began to take form. Here life became real. And that life spread into emerging new creatures, evolving into ever higher intelligence. In time, in this universe, there emerged creatures who were called human. And the uniqueness of these creatures lay in that they could perceive this life-giving power. They could name it and embrace it and grow with it and yearn for it. Thus, human life was born, but individual expressions of that human life were marked with a sense of incompleteness, inadequacy, and a hunger that drove them ever beyond the self to search for life's secret and to seek the source of life's power. This was a humanity that could not be content with anything less. Finally, in the fullness of time, within that human family, one unique and special human life appeared. Whole, complete, free, loving, living, being at one, at peace, and at rest. Of that life, people said, Jesus, you are the Christ. For in you we see and feel and experience the living force of life and love and being of God. He was hated, rejected, betrayed, killed, but he was never distorted. For here was a life in which the goal, the dream, the hope of all life is achieved. A single life among many lives. Here among us, out from us, and yet this power, this essence, was not from us at all, for the Christ power that was seen in Jesus is finally of God. And even when the darkness of death overwhelmed him, the power of life resurrected him. For Christ's power is life eternal, without beginning, without ending. It is the secret of creation. It is the goal of humanity. Here in this life we glimpse that immortal, invisible, most blessed, most glorious, almighty, life-giving force in this universe, in startling completeness, in a single person. They searched for the words to describe that moment. They recognized the fullness of his power, living in history, living in the life of this person, but words failed them. So they lapsed into poetry. When this life was born, they said a great light split the dark sky. Angelic choruses peopled the heavens to sing of peace on earth. They told of a virgin mother, of shepherds compelled to worship, of a rejecting world that had no room in the inn. They told of stars and oriental kings, of gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. For when this life was born, that power that was and is with God, inseparable, the endless beginning, was even seen in a baby in swaddling clothes, lying in a manger. Christ's power. Jesus, you are the Christ. To know you is to live, to love, and to be. Oh, come then, let us adore him. I am told that we have some special guests joining us for music today. And this would be Silent Night. Do you want to introduce your special
We welcome the youth of our congregation.
Silent night,
from the understanding that all of these stories are compilations of the wisdom of humanity. And the study of the Bible is really a study of consciousness. That the stories told are helping us, that we're each, all of those characters, they represent some part of our consciousness. And that all the places and the things and the experiences are part of a mythos, a way of perceiving reality. You see, this idea of myth that root has its idea in mystery, in mysticism. They all come from that root word, which understands that metaphorical way that we have taught. You see, it's a relatively late invention in the history of humanity that we would dissect and logicize everything. I don't know if that's a word, but I like it, so we'll use that one for today. Right? That would make everything logical when these stories, you see, many of the stories that have been passed down through humanity were stories. You can imagine people sitting around campfires, telling the story of where we come from, who we are, what is life all about. And so in that context, we have this remarkable person named Jesus who became aware of his own divinity and taught from that perspective. You see, the Christ, we believe, is the presence of God with which each person is anointed at creation. It is the eternal essence of God that is our true spiritual nature. It can be called the spark of God that ignites the human flame. Different traditions have different terms for that quality. But we use the Christos, the anointing, as an understanding. So there's two sorts of ways, there's two presentations of Jesus in the Bible. One is as the Son of Man, who Jesus most oftenly referred to himself as. And then there's the Son of God. And both are true. Isn't that lovely? So in Charles and Myrtle's understanding, they helped us to be clear about the relationship with the Christ within. Charles Fillmore said, Christ is the mind of God individualized. And Myrtle says, Christ is the life principle within each one of us. Emily Cady, one of our great early Unity theologians, was equally direct in her explanation, saying the Lord is the Christ of our own being. John Shelby Spong, in another wonderful book called Liberating the Gospels, says when we read these stories, you see, we have this beautiful Christmas story. I went all crazy this year with my Christmas decorations and got out my nativity scene. And I put that up and I was done. It's a quick process. But I noticed in my nativity scene, I had a little baby Jesus, Mary, Joseph. I have some wise men. I have some shepherds. Got a couple sheep. Didn't get the deluxe version with the camel. So, you have this whole thing. But if you read the stories, there's two distinct stories. In one story, you have sheep and shepherds. In another story, you have wise men. They're two distinct stories if you want to go back and read this, because people were interpreting this life. As John Spong says, it was so, whatever transpired in this awakening of humanity, we didn't have words for it. So we built stories around it. The stories are beautiful. The stories are wonderful. So we, in our minds, have kind of collapsed all of it. So if you get the really deluxe set, nativity set, you get all of it. You get angels, you get, wise men, you get sheep and shepherds and camels and the whole thing. And we pretend like that was the story told, but it wasn't. And it doesn't matter. On one side, we have a story of the humbleness of life being born. You see, in the Jewish tradition, the Messiah was believed to be the anointed one that would lead the Jews into the next great period. the next great life. And so the Messiah was looked to be this new ruler on earth. And so it's a very powerful and profound story to tell the story of the Christ child being born in the most humble of circumstances. No room at the inn. No place. Born of simple, humble understanding. And so he was not a ruler, a king that rode in with an army, but rather a Messiah who would teach us who we are and how we might teach, how we might treat one another, how we might remember and live more fully. You see, Shelby Spong says that behind these legends, behind these stories, there was a person who was real and an experience of God that was profound. This Jesus also broke barriers for them. He overcame sickness and separation. He called people into wholeness and oneness. I think over and over as my understanding of healing, of spiritual healing has emerged, of the consciousness through which Jesus must have lived, so that when the sick came to him, he did not see sick people. He saw their inherent wholeness and their inherent divinity. And it was that which he called forth. Because you see, there is a spiritual prototype within each one of us. There is a wholeness and a perfection that is transcendent of all the stuff that our bodies go through, that our lives go through. There is an inherent wholeness to who we are. And when we can remember that, and when we can practice that, and when in truth we can be in agreement with each other about that, that's where healing occurs. That's where revelation takes place. So in this story, Jesus broke down those barriers. You see, there was very much a separation of a time that my friend Arlene, who you met, was here, and I love the Jewish tradition. I think there's 512 different rituals that a good Jew will follow. Now, I don't know, I'd probably get to 100 and be like, I can't keep track, right? Now, to me, that is a way of developing a remembrance of God in all things, right? And so Jesus was radical when he would teach on the Sabbath. And he would work on the Sabbath. And people are like, whoa, you can't do that. There's a way you are supposed to behave. But his ministry was to say, neither low here nor low there, but within us is this spiritual dimension. He was continuing the teachings that had been taught before with a radically new idea, a radical way of being. He said crazy things like, it's not what you put in your mouth that matters, it's what comes from your mouth. Wow. I know people, I'm not going to name them, I'm not going to point, not pointing, not even going to look in your direction. I know people who get caught in the ritual part of the thing and forget the heart behind it, right? It's not what you eat, when you eat, how you eat. It's what you say and what comes from your heart that determines who you are. So Jesus was helping break down these barriers. These words were written, as Shelby Spong says, is that they were not an attempt to be a historic description of an objective reality. They were much more like curtains drawn apart to reveal the mystery of a living God, a God who was for them, beyond the power that any words could finally describe. This is why I say we want to enter into the mythical qualities of these stories. This is why I don't have a problem with whatever we sing, because we're not singing literal facts. Some of us would believe that stars don't indeed move through the skies. You can see in first century why you would believe that, but we've had some updates. We've had some new downloads that help us understand reality differently, but it doesn't take away from the beauty of the guidance of the heavens to guide us to this place. So in the mystical mind, in the cosmic mind, in that understanding, we begin to understand that the mystical conception of Christ is an idea of the universality of our oneness with the divine, of our sonship and our daughtership of the one. And so it is a beautiful story as we tell this nativity scene of God revealing itself through this precious, humble child. And that child is the child in each one of us. That recognition of who we are can be realized and embodied. I don't know why my mind works this way, but it does. I just had this image come through of some little cartoon that I saw on Facebook, I'm sure, of Mary trying to bathe baby Jesus. And he's standing on the water, and she's like, cut it out. Right? Cut it out, man. See, it's like, if he was just born that way, imagine trying to raise that kid, right? But the understanding that this precious child who came into the recognition of who he was, who released the sense of separation, of otherness, so that he could stand in truth and say, those that have seen me have seen this divine power. That if you will follow my way of being, you will experience this kingdom of heaven. And that heaven was not meant to be a location and earth a separate location, but heaven was meant to be a consciousness of awareness and understanding that is present here. They're not one or the other. They're here and now if we so choose to live that way. Now that's good news. That's some gospel going on, right? We're not here to suffer through this experience. We're here to live it, to love it, to enjoy it, to feel it, to cry through it when we need to cry, and to laugh heartily when it's time to laugh, and to experience the fullness of being right here and right now. That's the good news. So Jesus put forth these ideas, and they began to move forward, and other people began to practice and learn and understand that there's one power, Father, Mother, God, whatever we choose to call it, that this power is within us gives birth to a divine idea. And that when we surrender to that greater possibility, when we surrender to that greater self, then greater works than these are also born within us. How good is that? We have power that we haven't imagined. We have capability that we have not tapped. We have awareness that we've yet to fully discover. And so remembering who we are, that this Christ's presence was given to us from the beginning, awaiting its recognition of us. The profound truth was Jesus discovered this and taught it. And that whatever is true of humanity, all of reality is the reality of one's nature. It is the divine presence within. You see, as the external Jesus, the Son of Man, gave way to the Son of God. The Christ was born within him. And that Christ Spirit took on this human form and became the voice of God for humanity. How good is that? My teacher, my friend, my mentor, Ernest Holmes, once said something very powerful and profound. And he said that, in conclusion, in this talk that he was giving, that what the world needs is spiritual conviction followed by spiritual experience. He said, I would rather see a student of this truth prove its principle than to have him or her repeat all of the words of wisdom that have ever been uttered. It is far easier to teach the truth than it is to practice it. It is far easier to teach the truth than it is to practice it, which is why I do this job. So that you guys can do the hard work. Well, apparently I'm supposed to practice it too. I don't know. Right? We all know the truth. We all know the truth. I mean, if we've been doing this for a while, we know there's a power greater than we are. We know that it works through us. We know that we are one with it. And yet, when we're confronted with uncomfortable circumstance or things not to our liking, we may forget. We may forget and see the obstacle as the thing, not as the invitation to the truth. Have you ever considered that? That sometimes that obstacle, the challenge in our life is not a thing of itself, but it is an invitation into seeing the larger truth. Where there is sickness, let there be wholeness. Where there is lack, let there be abundance. Where there is anything other than the fullness of God, let us open our hearts and our minds in an awareness to who we are. Born of original blessing, imbued with all of the qualities of Spirit, awaiting our recognition of it. You see, Jesus wasn't born somehow different, but somehow, through the journey of his becoming, he had an awareness of who he was. And when he knew who he was, he taught those eternal truths of love, kindness, compassion. He said radical stuff to us, which we would do well to remember in these difficult times. He said to us, pray for your enemies. Forgive those who have hurt you. Like, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm happy to pray for the people that agree with me. Happy to see the God in them. But that's not what he said. That's why I say Jesus' teachings are radical. We've gotten so used to having a little nativity scene, and that's sweet, but they're radical teachings. If you're really practicing living the open-hearted, compassionate life, seeing all of God's creation as beautiful and perfect, that's radical stuff. And we're all called to it. So this, for me, is the season of remembrance. As we celebrate the outer rituals and stories and all of this all these beautiful things that we've designed to help us remember. Ultimately, that awakening is the awakening each one of us must have within our own heart and mind. You see, Deepak Chopra once said that physically light is what you see when you wake up in the morning, but mystically, it's what you see when you wake up to your soul. When you see the truth, we see not physical bodies, but we see light beings housed in form for this amazing journey. And we bless the light. We celebrate the light. Tomorrow's service is about lighting that candle of truth, because we know that light casts out darkness, that love casts out fear, that joy is our divine inheritance, and it is good. Let us pray. How good it is to remember this truth, to simply be present in this moment, to open our hearts fully to that divine presence that is awaiting our recognition of it, to surrender the things of the ego, the things that believe in separation, the things that believe in otherness, to recognize oneness, unity, wholeness, peace, love, joy, and harmony. For we are reminded in this season of light, we are born of the one light, the one eternal light. And that we are called forth to let our light shine brightly into the world, to be a blessing to all that we see, to recognize and know this divine presence as our very life and being, to share from that high purview of wisdom, of joy, of peace. So as we come together this day, in that remembrance, that in truth all that we seek is already ours, that wholeness is the order of the day, we allow that to express as health, as well-being, as vitality. We remember that we are already abundant beings, participating in a divine flow, graciously giving, joyously receiving of this infinite bounty. We know that indeed love is the only reality. We choose to fully forgive ourselves and each other, so that we might move back to a state of gracious loving, of gracious acceptance. The carols, the songs, the truth is sung. Let there be peace on earth. Let us experience goodwill for all. This call to our greater selves, let us embody it now. Let us live from that highest truth. Let us go unashamedly into the world and allow our light to shine brightly. How good it is to know this truth. How blessed we are to be together in spiritual community, to remember and remind each other of this truth. How blessed we are to shine our light, to be a blessing to all we meet. And so we extend that blessing from this place. We're holding that high vision for a world that works for all, for a planet at peace. We bless our brothers and sisters across the planet, recognizing our oneness, spiritual oneness that can never be divided. And as always, we bless all priests, rabbis, ministers, teachers of all faiths, for we honor and celebrate the many pathways to the divine. Where two or more are gathered, the I am is there, and it is good. In joy and gratitude, let us just give thanks in this moment. Let us breathe deeply into this awareness. Let it make itself known in our physical and ethereal bodies. Truly we are blessed. Let us be grateful. And so in joy and gratitude, I simply give thanks for this spiritual truth. I release this word through the power of the living Christ. I know that it is so. As together we say, and so it is. Amen. Beautiful, thank you. And so I would like to welcome back not only our choir, but our younger participants, slightly younger participants that are joining us today. You guys ready?
Amen.
invite these young people up to be on stage with me, and we're going to close out the service together. We're going to do Uncle Marty's affirmation, if that's okay. So come on up. Help me. I invite you to stand. So this is what I call an affirmicize. It engages both the words and the motions. And so you guys repeat after me. They'll do the same thing you do. It's going to be so cool. You're going to love it. Ready? Something magnificent is happening through me right now.
Something magnificent is happening through me right now.
It is happening through my mind.
It's happening through my mind.
Through my body.
Through my body.
Through my affairs.
Through my affairs.
I think it.
I think it.
I believe it.
I believe it.
I accept it.
I accept it.
I rejoice in it. I name it good and very good.
I name it good and very good.
Thank you, God.
Thank you, God.
And so it is.
And so it is.
Let's sing the peace song. And have a merry, merry Christmas.